Is Patrick ready?
Mr. Mayor, we had a closed session on 2 items. First, conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Performance Evaluation. City Attorney, there is no reporting out of that session. The second item was conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Appointment for the city manager position. And again, there's nothing to report out of closed session.
Thank you. With that, I'll call we'll adjourn out of closed session, and I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council, March 9th, 2020, 6:30 p.m. Could I get a roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Member Tim Clark.
Here.
Councilmember DeArnaz.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Waite.
Here.
Mayor Toussaint.
Here.
For the record, Mayor, all present. Thank you.
Robert, you want to lead us in the pledge?
Please stand and place your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item on the agenda tonight is public communications, written or verbal. I have 2 speaker slips. I'll start with Kim Jensen.
Good evening, Mayor Toussaint and council members. My name is Kim Jensen, and I'm here tonight to say just a thank you to the members of this local community, members of your city staff, and 2 council members for each saving a life. Additionally, I'd like to say thanks for the use of the Memorial Hall to hold this event. Also, a special thanks must go to the Rotarians, first responders, and fellow Vikings whom also contributed their efforts to the success of this event. In roughly 4.5 hours, the Vikings were able to raise an all-time high of 161 life-saving units of blood and plasma. It's great to know that we live in a city and valley that no matter how busy we are with our families, businesses, or community activities, we can all stop to give aid to a common cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Infante.
Good evening, Mark Infante, Solvang Citizen. Just a couple of comments I wanted to make. First off, I wanted to talk with regard to the BAR. I think it's excellent that you're trying to improve the planning. And I like what's going on with regard to documenting the functions of the BAR. It needs to be codified. The general plan needs to be updated to design. Guidelines need to be updated to sign. Ordinance needs to be updated. All of that stuff is very good, and I commend you for getting that process going. I might take exception, though, to the name you want to come up with. Branding and Design Committee. The gentleman from Cosmod at the State of the City said branding is a marketing issue. This is not a marketing group, so why is branding part of the title of this group? So it's really about design review, which brings me to the second part of it. You've got Branding and Design Committee. They're not designing anything, they're reviewing the design. So why isn't it called the Design Review Committee? I recommend a title of that nature. I'm also curious why the BAR members were put on hiatus and weren't even informed of that, by the way. I was never told. I found out when I came to the city council meeting and they said, hey, BAR's on hiatus. Wonderful. Okay. A couple of things about the BAR. The BAR is a very interesting organization, and the fact that it's not codified, I think it might have been taken from the fact that the Santa Barbara has a BAR. They have several of them, actually. And the one for this area, if you've ever been to the you've never even been to our local meeting, so I doubt that you've been there. But it's held over in the courtroom across the street. It's over across from the library. But that BAR actually is an architectural review. They're like our planning commission. They approve things based on architectural plans. They have to have architects. They have to have landscape architects. They don't care about the pretty. Their planning commission in Santa Barbara is a land use commission. So their BAR is really an architectural review, unlike our BAR, which I think is misnamed, and I think the Design Review Committee name makes some sense because what we're trying to do is maintain the design of the city. I had a BAR member come up to me at an event some time ago and ask me if I had ever said no to anybody that came up for the BAR, and I had to think about that for a second. I don't think I ever, I think I might have once or twice. But let me tell you what the BAR, the members, have been doing, and Ms. Waite knows about this. For instance, we had a business come up before us, and they wanted to put a store in town, and they wanted to put bars on the windows. Well, that's not very Hughie, if I'm saying that properly. But we didn't say no, because there is no code that says you can't have bars. I'm out of time, aren't I? Basically, I
Finish
said,
up.
what we said was we recommended if you're going to have bars, put them on the inside so they're not offensive, so it doesn't disturb the city's image. And maybe instead of making them vertical, make them horizontal and hang things on them so it looks like part of your display. This is what we did. We try to help businesses succeed and fit within the image of the city. I hope we will continue to do that with this new committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Next item is the consent agenda. Do any council members have any items they wish to poll? If not, is there a motion accepting the consent agenda as is?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as is.
I'll go ahead and second that.
It's been moved and seconded.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Diarnes,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint.
Yes.
That motion carries 5-0 to approve the consent calendar.
All right, on to the regular business agenda. Item number 4, planning permit review policies and procedure. Could we get a staff?
Would you like to do the city manager report first?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I skip past? Yeah, okay. My pages are split, it's throwing me off. All right, city managers and executive reports.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have a fairly short agenda today, and I have a little bit of a longer than usual city manager report. The first topic that I would like to just give a brief overview on that also impacts our marketing and tourism efforts is the coronavirus information. As I've mentioned before, we have the information for residents online in terms of keeping track of any cases that may be in our county. As you can see, based on Santa Barbara County website that's being updated on a daily basis, we have 0 cases in Santa Barbara County. We are, however, vigilant and understand that there may be some uncertainty and impacts in our tourism efforts. We do not have official city records as of this time within for sales tax and for TOT, the bed tax, for the time period when coronavirus became an issue and may have impacted our numbers. But we are keeping an eye on it, and we know that, for example, during the Great Recession, the city of Solvang actually was less impacted than many other jurisdictions because we have the people that we anecdotally are now hearing again who live in LA and San Francisco, for example, who are now avoiding flights. Back then it was because of the money. Right now it may be because of the coronavirus. We have seen some anecdotal information that we may be capturing those groups of people coming up from LA and from San Francisco to Solvang as a destination to still have a vacation but not have to go on a plane. So we are monitoring the situation and we'll adjust as necessary for those who, both from the revenue perspective and our marketing efforts, and also making sure that we keep an eye on any coronavirus cases in our city. The only large city planned event that we expect coming up is going to be in April, and that would be something that will somewhat replace the Taste of Solvang. IDK is working on that, and they will be coming up with the exact details of that, but it will be an event, once again, kind of resembling the Taste of Solvang, and it will also be tied to the Rembrandt exhibition at the Elverhoj Museum. So that is the only large city planned event that we know of between now and then the summer months begin, which is a really busy period for the city as it is, so there's less specific efforts by the city that take place then. So it would be a little bit more of a natural flow during that period of time as far as marketing and tourism is concerned.
I like your notes about how Solvang experienced more mild recession, because what I'm hearing from people is that there's more stay vacations happening here in Solvang from nearby proximities versus, but then that has different impacts on the businesses that will do okay with the stay vacations versus the other spending patterns of tourism that's not coming
Right.
here.
So we're keeping an eye on that, and we'll have some more detailed, numbers next month, where we'll be able to give a little bit more of a story on TOT and sales tax and how we are dealing with it. So we'll see.
And on another note, we've League of California Cities, we're going to have a dinner here later this month because they have a quarterly dinners. That has now been canceled until we get past the coronavirus things, because we're noticing that participation is dropping and some other people have already canceled, so that would be pushed off. If you've already received notices, that meeting is not going to be happening this month.
Right. So I think the key takeaway from this is that we are definitely keeping a close eye on the health conditions, and we are also being vigilant, and we'll be, reacting and adjusting as needed any marketing and tourism efforts. And this is also kind of unfolding as we dive into the next financial plan. So as we develop our numbers on revenue for the next financial plan, we'll definitely need to consider several scenarios to make sure that we look at the best and kind of worst case scenarios in terms of our TOT impacts. So moving on to State of the City, on March 28th, we had State of the
February.
City.
February 28th?
Sorry, February 28th. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm already in April. On February 28th, the city held the State of the City. It was the first time fully put on program by the city. We actually had expanded the sessions for the first time, including both a morning session that was open to all public at the Vets Hall, and also having a lunch option for the Cork Hotel. The morning session was an hour long, the lunch was 2 hours long. We weren't quite sure how much interest and demand there would be for the two sessions, but I must say that both sessions were well attended. The lunch session sold over 100 tickets, and then our Vets Hall session also looked, just by looking at the room and knowing how many seats we had set out, I would say had pretty much close to 100 people as well. So both of those sessions were fully attended. We got press coverage, and working with our PR consultant, we estimate that even though this was not a money-raising exercise at all, this was really about the public engagement and reaching out to the residents and businesses in the community with the State of the City and those presentations. But anecdotally, we also estimate that out of the press coverage, we also got about $20,000 in PR value on that. And I just want to clarify and go over who made presentations on what during the State of the City. None of the speakers who were invited for the State of the City were directed by the city itself. Those were their presentations. Those are owned by the speakers. So we had several speakers at different sessions. At the lunch, we had opening speaker Monique Limon, our California State Assembly member, who opened up the session. And obviously we had the mayor speak at both sessions, which was more of the city official program that was included in that presentation. And then we had these independent speakers that we brought in to talk about the Solvang and some of the interesting topics that also align with what we are working on at the City Hall. So we had Shelby Sim and actually Scott Shemix talking about marketing, and that is part of the city, at least on the IDK part. Then we had Spirit of Solvang presented by Esther Jacobs Bates, who developed that based on her program at the Elverhoj Museum. We had a presentation on branding, which was put together and is a property of the Hirsch Bendner Associates. And the purpose of that presentation was to talk about the branding concepts. So they had a full presentation, including a logo for the city of Solvang. That is actually, we don't own that logo. That was part of their work product that they developed as a presenter to the city on the concept of branding.
Conversation starter.
Conversation starter, and that has not been brought to the council for any official action at this point. We also had some development success stories presented by Jim Cannell on the Lansby Hotel, and then a discussion on the Power Building. And then finally, we had economic development discussion by Cosmon Companies, which is one of the city's consultants, so there is more synergy in terms of what they were presenting and our active work with them as our consultant for economic development. With that, I would like to turn to another issue that's just, we don't need council action today, but there's been a lot of, I think, potential misconception or misunderstanding, so I would like to just really clarify for the record the law enforcement contract with Santa Barbara County and how this works. So we will be, or council will be reviewing again the next contract for law enforcement services for the next financial plan for general law enforcement, as well as any additional items that the council might want to contract for, which are typically the community resource deputy or motor unit, which is offered by the Santa Barbara County. So the City of Solvang Law Enforcement Services have always been contracted through the Santa Barbara County since the city incorporated. We are one of their 4 contract cities in the county of Santa Barbara. I would like to very much clarify it that all sheriff's employees are employees of the Sheriff's Department. We do not employ any employees by the Sheriff's Department. We simply enter into a contract, and we do not actually have any say in selecting who works with the city as far as those employees. So for example, we have our lieutenant retiring right now. His last day is gonna be March 28th, I believe. And the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department has already gone through the recruitment process for that position. So we will have a new lieutenant, or also known as chief of police, that the city will receive. We have no part in the seat of selecting that police chief. We simply can hold the county to provide the services under the contract. So, as I said, city does not control assignment of deputies, of chief of police, contracts for general law enforcement services, and then we also contract or could contract for community resource deputy or motorcycle unit. On the issue of COPS grant prior to 2011 used to be a state program through Supplemental Law Enforcement Services Fund. In 2011, the state enacted a realignment program with their 2011-12 budget to where it is now part of that program, and it is for frontline law enforcement. And so the County of Santa Barbara has changed their process of how they distribute the funds to the city with actually this current fiscal year, to where we simply receive a revenue instead of trying to get some kind of calculation just for accounting purposes only of netting revenues and expenditures. So now it's actually a lot more clean. And what this 2011 realignment does is guarantee $100,000 per year to jurisdictions, with then jurisdictions or cities that have frontline law enforcement can receive more money for larger populations. So I'm not sure if we would be ever receiving more than $100,000, but we know that we will be receiving $100,000. So this chart here gives a little bit of history on law enforcement costs over time. What you see here is costs from 2015-16 through the current budget, and then also the preliminary numbers that the Sheriff's Department has already given me. So you'll see that we have the law enforcement contract, which is our general contract. It's about equivalent to one full-time position. We are billed by hour, and we are actually part of this whole valley team of law enforcement, so to speak. They have people assigned to Solvang, Buellton, the county, the Chumash Casino, and then as calls come in, all of those people respond and book their time to City of Solvang when it's related, and we get reports on those calls and activity. And as long as we are about at 100% and don't exceed 112% of the contract hours, that's what we are billed for. And then there is the menu items, as they call it, which can be the community resource deputy position or can be a motor vehicle. And then on the right, you see the COPS grant revenue. So you will see that from 15-16 for general law enforcement services, we went from $1.6 million to now in 2021 looking at $2.1 million increase for just those general law enforcement services. Then you will see in the next column for community resource deputy, we went from $153,000 to now go into a preliminary estimate of about $306,000, which would cost us next year should the city decide to contract for those services. And then the COPS grant revenue obviously is, you see the 120, I'm estimating 100 for 2021. There's a little bit more research to do on that. The spike of 169 in 1920 is actually because we got both current funds for 1920, which was 100, and then we got some back pay for the previous year of 1819 because of the change in methodology. So prior to 1819, they would actually give us the bill the following year, so it was 1 year lag. So activities, expenses, and the COPS revenue would happen in 1 year, and then the next year we would get the net of either the revenue or expenditure, whichever one was greater. So that's just a change in methodology. Once again, the COPS grant is for frontline enforcement. We will receive it regardless of your choices on the menu items. And those are the costs that we are looking at.
So, and it's my understanding that the primary driver in the cost increases is switching from like a full-time equivalent type cost calculation to the city to a full cost recovery type calculation.
So there's a couple of different things that happened. The contract prior to this year, and I believe it's 5-year chunks of contract as far as how the programmatic approach works. It used to be that we were assigned just one body. So now they went to the type of contracting to where instead of assigning one body, they are assigning equivalent of that position. So we're paying for the hours of approximately that one position, but it's actually having everybody that's responding to those calls and everybody that's in this area on the sheriff's units being coded to the city of Solvang. The county also used to use cost allocation estimates before for building their budgets, and now they went to actuals. So it actually took them, because cost allocation, the county has a lag of, I believe, a year, maybe 2. It took them, I believe it's 2, it took them 2 years to gather data of the actuals, that now all of their proposals are based on actual costs. So the county is actually doing a full cost recovery based on what they expensed.
Okay,
So
but for year 2018-19, there's no amount for the community resource deputy, and you're saying that that's folded into what?
I would have to, there is a community resource deputy, sorry. I would have to find that amount. There is no, the COPS, I would have to pull the contract itself. So this is based on financial record. And so what we got in 1920 was the difference between the cost of the community resource deputy and the COPS grant received, and that was received as revenue. And that's about $69,000. So as far as the cost of that contract, I would have to find what that is. Yes, there's one data point missing here.
So the COPS for 2020 was about 100,000 as well.
Yeah.
And 69,595 for 2019.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, you can see that all of these contracts are definitely jumping up, but you can see the very large jump from 1920 to 2021 in proposed costs. So what the goal is to, through the next financial plan development, is to work through the contracted scope of services and talk about what it is that the city actually wants to have in terms of the contract. Shall the city elect to contract for something above and beyond just the general law enforcement contract. So I'm working with the sheriff's department to see what the best kind of package would be that the county would be agreeable to where we can justify 2,080 hours of actual sworn deputy being here, because sworn deputy actually costs more than, you know, some of the non-sworn positions. So we talked about before where the council voted to terminate the current community resource deputy grant. We talked about the fact that, you know, we have management of special events now going to IDK. There's also, you know, certain parts of that work falling into Parks and Recreation Department. Sworn deputy comes with the cost of, you know, their special training, their upkeep of their special training, and all of the county overhead. So in developing this package, if you elect through the process of the financial plan to enter into a contract for either CRD or a motor unit or a blend of something, what I'm working through with them right now is developing the best scenario package to where we could show that you may need 2,080 hours of actual law enforcement time under that contract. Or alternatively, there will be options on how can you address some of your needs on traffic or events and whatnot by just using overtime and working with Sheriff's Department on those.
And if you go back to your prior slide, so as my understanding is that as they're implementing this full cost recovery method, and we're seeing these dramatic cost increases, that was going to be implemented, you know, like 10% per year. Do we know about how many more years of very substantial increases that just at status quo that?
So my understanding from the first meeting with the county on this, that they did not do any kind of smoothing mechanism in this number, to where they looked at the fact that $2.1 million was not beyond the expected type of increase. So they did not do any smoothing, is my understanding. That was kind of their, you know, kind of like CalPERS does, your costs go up, we'll stretch it out over 5 years instead of just giving you one large bill. My understanding that they just cut us up. That's the actual number.
Got it. Okay. It's very significant.
So as part of the 2012 or 2020-22 financial plan in May, we'll come back to you with, you know, preliminary findings on what those options may be going forward. And City Attorney, did you have an additional comment?
Just so that we don't have to answer this question when we get asked this question, and that you've already answered it. I noticed that you had 200, I think it was 209,500 as the budgeted amount for the community resource deputy, but I've actually reviewed the contract, and the contract amount was instead $225,211. And my understanding is that's the amount the city is actually would have paid if you went for a full year at that position for 1920. So again, the actual cost of the city is approximately $16,000 more than the budgeted amount that you have up here.
Yes, thank you for that.
And will continue to
clarification.
increase.
Yes. Okay, so moving on to advanced calendar, just a reminder, we have a little bit of a longer stretch between now and the next meeting. We moved the March 23rd council meeting to March 30th. So it will be a fairly full agenda. One of the items that we plan on bringing back on March 30 is the economic development update. As you would recall, you have extended the contract with Cosman Companies to continue to work with the city on both the specific site for the Veterans Hall as well as on overall economic development options. What we will bring to you on March 30th is an update on initial meetings. We have been meeting with key stakeholders. We have had meetings with the county, and we'll continue to work with those stakeholders in specific departments, such as the Sheriff's Department. We'll also be reaching out and are awaiting a time to discuss this proposal with the courts. We'll also be talking to the senior citizens complex there, center, and coming back to you on March 30th with those results. We are also actively working as a city with the private developer there that's just to the, I want to say west or east of the Veterans Hall, and we think that we have some good progress there. On March 30th as well, we will be kicking off the process of 2022 financial plan development. This would be the first of series of at least 3 meetings to where you will first look at the financial forecasts and the financial policies. This little graph over here, something that was presented, the state of the city that we are targeting overall with our financial models to be able to divert at least $1 million towards investing in infrastructure rather just on operations based on the changes that we are doing organizationally. We'll also continue to focus on widening that gap between the green line and the orange line to where we will increase the revenue as much as possible while containing the expenditures on operating side and then being able to reinvest back into the city. On the marketing-related items, we will be coming back on March 30th with events permitting policy and procedures being developed by IDK, and we will talk also about the steering committee to help us with marketing terms going forward. We will also bring back conceptual Solvang Park RFP that was previously heard by the council with precise recommendations and would be ready to go out to bid for actual construction once that's heard by the council. So that's a picture of Solvang Park the way it used to be, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. And we are looking forward to making some changes there, working with IDK to best serve both the community and the tourists and the events that it is a major part of. We'll also have some items on the branding side of things where we'll talk about the branding design committee ordinance. You have already approved the resolution, so that will be coming back to you for official codification as an ordinance. And we'll also come back with results from the branding design guidelines and sign ordinance RFP. So that would be for you to make some decisions in terms of how we move forward with those desired updates to both the design guidelines and the sign ordinance, which also has to deal with this concept of branding for the city of Solvang. And then finally, just a note to everyone and to remind that Golden Elements business license revocation item was continued to March 30th. So we will be coming back. It will be a public hearing on March 30th for you to make a decision again. So if there is anybody in the public that would like to come and speak on this Golden Elements, which is also known as the makeup stores, there's 2 locations in Copenhagen, Alisal. That would be a good time for everybody to come in and give their feedback. And then finally, there will be a little bit of a housekeeping item on information technology recommendations. We've been making some adjustments under existing budget, but this would be an ask for the council on what we would like to accomplish before the next fiscal year kicks in for IT specifically. And that concludes my city manager report.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any city attorney report or?
Can I ask one question real quick?
Yes, go for it.
So because I know we moved to November, March 30th, that conference is still on for the 22nd and 23rd?
The conference is still on as far as I know. Yes.
The only thing that I'd point out is there have been other conferences that have been canceled. So again, if a little pop-up happens in San Diego, I'd expect everyone to freak out and cancel it.
Understood.
With that, we'll move on to the regular business agenda. We got item number 4, planning permit review policies and procedures. Can we get a staff report?
Did they pass the consent agenda?
We
Yes.
did pass the
Yeah,
consent
we
agenda.
kind of went out of order there.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off this meeting or this item, and then we'll ask Lori Tamura here, who is also present, to come up and answer any questions if there is any more technical questions. Basically, this item here is to update the council on where we are with the planning department and some of the work that's being done, has been done, and is going to be done in terms of making it much more efficient and friendly for our community and the development. There are several recommendations, or 4 recommendations, plus 5 for future efforts in terms of what we are doing to make our planning department be much more efficient. The first recommendation is for the land use permit to require documentation of reviewed materials and documentation. So what it's been a sort of a effort of multiples of us to figure out exactly what's going on in the planning department. So myself, city attorney, and now Lori have all been working on determining the current state of our policies and procedures, and then starting to make our way in terms of making recommendations on what needs to be changed. And so one of the things that we've found out is that in our code, a municipal code, we actually require a land use permit, which is the first process in permitting a project that looks at all impacts of what that project is going to have. So, and we've been using a land clearance on that, and city attorney might have some additional information on it as well. But what we are noticing here and proposing is that as we move forward, creating a very clear policy and procedure for land use permit that then documents all the factors of the project and all the considerations that were taken into account, including timeline and reasoning for how projects are being approved, and an actual land use permit being issued to comply with our municipal code. So that's a clarification issue that we were not originally aware of, that we are actually doing just land use clearance, which makes it really hard then to find out what documents were submitted to back up any decisions on the land use for any project.
I would note one of the other things that we found about the problem with the fact that the city was not following its own procedure related to issuance of land use permits is the land use permit has a particular time period for which it's valid, and under the municipal code you can look that up. The informal process that instead was being followed doesn't have that time period for expiration, and so certain projects, for example, the building that's known as the water wheel building had been just getting kind of kicked down the road for 6 years. And when we went back to try and figure out how did that happen, because, for example, that project, as all projects or almost all projects in the TRC, require that they first have a development plan approval. The development plan absolutely expires after 3 years unless it is formally extended by the Planning Commission. And then the way you keep track of things like that is through the land use permit, which expires after a year unless it's extended. Again, no land use permit had ever been issued. The development plan was being extended informally by the planning director through a process that's not in your code. And so you had a project that where a building had been sitting empty at that point for the 2 years they'd gone through the process to get an approval, and then the 6 years since their approval. It, as you all probably remember, it had falling down chain link fencing around it. It had, plywood hanging off the walls. It had a number of things that I don't think you want to have occurring in your city. And again, all because there was no way to track really the timing of the approvals and the timing of actions like paying parking in lieu fees and other things that were supposed to occur for that project. And so hopefully that's the worst example we come across of why we need to go through this process and actually follow your code.
All right, so recommendation number 2, following this discussion directly, is establishing clear workflows and deadlines that need to be established for plan review and permitting. So once again, clear deadlines, clear process. Always, obviously, there's exceptions to the rule to where there may be circumstances to where deadlines may need to be extended. However, if you have a very clear process with deadlines, then you have that documentation as to why any decisions are being made and how long it takes for any project to go through the process. The next recommendation is for Planning Commission and Board of Architecture review. That's the process that we're going through on the separate item with establishing a BDC based on council direction, but also as part of that process being very clear about the hierarchy and the process between the city council, the planning commission, and this new BDC body, to where we have found some examples, for example, actually the clock tower being something that when we look at the BAR approval of the colors, etc., it's actually inconsistent with what was originally presented to the Planning Commission. And so some of those relationships between those bodies definitely need to be very much clarified, because the BDC would then be following inconsistency with the Planning Commission. So those are the things that we need to make sure to address as we bring the ordinance back to you going forward. Then we have recommendation for implementing the permitting software, which is actually a separate item on today's agenda, but it's part of this overall process of clarifying our processes, deadlines, and having all of that not just in old style paper, but actually have it in a very logical workflow that's automated and forces you to follow those policies and procedures. So one of the recommendations later today will be for you to approve implementation of a permitting software, which will give us the capability to give people that need a permit to have self-service, be able to look at the process of their project approval, and will definitely extremely improve efficiencies at the city in having everything automated in one system and actually being up to the 21st century in today's technology. For future efforts, we also know that there's some ordinances that may need updating that were changed over time, to where once upon a time it seems like, based on city attorney's research, they made sense, and then some of the things changed, and so now we have some ordinances, for example, like the one that allows or actually says the planning director shall permit if there isn't basically an amendment to a project if it doesn't exceed 300 square feet. And so they can do that every 2 years, and so arguably you could have a really small building become a really big building without any actual planning process applied to it. So some of those things are also being under review and will be coming back to council. Overall, this has been just a very conceptual update to council. There is no specific, unless you have any additional direction for staff, this is receive and file. And
Okay.
thank you.
Are there any questions of the staff report? Okay. Do we have, is Lori speak on this item, or is that on?
Only if you have questions.
Only if you have questions. Okay.
My only comment is I actually,
If it's a comment, let's go to public comment.
Got it.
All right, so with that, I'll take it to public comment. I have no speaker slips on this item. Would anyone like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll take it back to the council for discussion and action. Robert, would you like to start?
just, all I was going to say was I totally agree with Mr. Infante's comments about the design review and not the branding, to take that out, but that's just my opinion, because it doesn't sound like it's branding. It sounds like a design review, and I think it's a better name for it.
Okay.
Yep, I agree with Mr. Clark. I thought that was an excellent suggestion, and I know we don't normally take action on public comment.
Yeah, I'd actually
Yeah.
suggest saving that for public comments, and I was going to say that I'd be more than happy to sit down with Mr. Infante and talk about that, but it's not really on this agenda item. With that, Daniel, you have anything on this item? No? Chris?
No.
No? I would just like, I like giving clear direction, and Laura, you're new here now working with us, so this whole thing around planning and building for Solvang has been one of the council's top priorities. In fact, even the last election, every person running, basically, this was part of their platform. So I'm just stressing how important this item is to the council.
No question.
And I'd highly recommend sitting down with each council member and understanding their concerns and figuring out how you're going to come out with a product that's going to make this council happy. So with that, that's all I really have. I guess we just need to receive and file. Okay.
Motion, second.
Motion to receive and file. I will make that.
I'll second it.
It's been seconded.
Member Tim Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Diarnis.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Wade,
Yes.
Mayor Tucson,
Yes.
Motion to receive and file passes 5-0, Mayor. Thank you.
Item number 5, implementation of new permitting software.
So this item is asking for authorization from the council to enter into a contract with Dude Solutions to start implementing permitting software. We, as staff, city, have gone through the process of looking at all potential candidates for permitting software, where we started with about 8 options. I want to say about 8 months ago, and all city staff that would be involved in this process was involved, and it was a overall recommendation from everyone that was conclusive that Dude Solutions was the best software for us to select and was also competitive in terms of pricing. So what the recommendation here today is for you to authorize staff to enter into a contract with Dude Solutions to begin implementation this year. Implementation takes about 6 months or so. And we did apply for SB2 grant for assistance from the state for planning and received that grant. So this cost would actually be fully borne at the amount of about $57,000 from the grant funds that we will be receiving this year. And I'm not representative of this particular software. We've had many presentations with them, but I just wanted to click through some slides to give you and the public kind of an idea of what this software looks like and feels like. So here they have at first dashboards. So this is the type of dashboard at a glance that you would be able to see on our city side as far as the activity, the counts by time period, and then you will be able to drill into any of those statistics. So that's kind of a typical, modern software view and what we should be able to see. This is a screen from permitting side to where our staff would be able to enter their projects and keep track of them through a very defined workflow that we would be determining as part of this implementation that will then clarify and very much also help staff follow the guidelines that are then embedded into this software, to where it's not just somebody forgot to tell somebody that one permit or one step needs to be done. The software can actually guide and help and ensure that those steps are being followed.
Will
and
this,
being followed on
will this
time.
software also ensure that certain permits don't suddenly disappear from the files? Or that they
It
are
will create
complete?
a database, so you have complete database. So when the permit started, all documentation in one place, everybody that touched it, it's all logged in to the software.
I want to
So
make the
no
distinction.
more mystery, very much
Yeah,
transparent.
I want to make the distinction for the public. We've never had this before, and we've had a lot of problems because of the lack of a proper system. So thank you for doing this.
So yes, right now the software we have is very basic for just very basic functions, and then like I said, a lot of it is actually still on paper. All of our forms, all of our work processes are paper-based and file-based.
And it'll keep an audit trail and everything, so you
Right.
can't just go in there and
Right.
wipe things away.
So I'm just gonna flip through some of these details. That's more screens on how the permitting side of this looks like. And then they have a mobile app available with it. So you can also look at things, look at projects, look at locations on your mobile app. And it's not just for permitting software. So after we get through this, it's also for business licenses. So business licenses have to be approved by planning first. So you have that workflow to where all approvals happen and everything in that record before you issue your business license. So business licenses would be part of the system. Code enforcement, also another element that's tied to this. Code enforcement right now doesn't have any software or anything other than paper and maybe sometimes an Excel spreadsheet where we keep track of our code enforcement actions. So this would create a code enforcement mechanism all in one system, all by address, all in one spot for each address. Recurring inspections, so we need to do inspections on our buildings, all here. Public portal, this is probably something that will be really exciting for the public, to where you have a public portal where people from the community can actually log in, submit their applications, look at their tracking, and it's all right there. They are compatible with Bluebeam, so that's something that is used by the industry. So all of the corrections and changes that are being done to the plans can be part of the software. It's all integrated. They also integrate with GIS. There will be the parcel map and all of that right there. And your financials. So right now I am finding out that there's actually some loans on parking and lieu fees that are in the planning side, and actually on the finance side, we don't even know that those loans were made, regardless of whether those were even allowable under the government code. But we don't know that we have $150,000 unpaid because it never made it to the financials. So even though we do audits on financial side, we'll never catch that. All of this is
And that's
integrated.
another issue relative to the prior item. I think even like, for example, the water wheel project, I believe
Right.
that through that submittal, there's probably a decent chunk of parking and lieu fees due, but then you'd kind of go in and talk to so-and-so and so-and-so and say, hey, you're great, let's, just put this over here, and this kind of quasi-loan thing with no real terms or payments being made, and then you end up with projects that, sit here
Right.
forever
And that
to
don't,
no
and
benefit
that
to the
don't
community.
make payments, and even if it was somehow allowable for us to enter into that kind of agreements, it should at least sit on the books as a liability, so
Right.
we know it needs to be paid.
I want to give credit to both you and our city attorney for finding this problem, correcting this problem, and showing the community that, yes, we can make a difference. I can't believe we allowed this for how many decades now? This should have never happened. Thank you.
So financials are,
If I may on that one too, this is one where, and there's some things that blow me away. Your municipal code and your ordinances, in many instances, once you can find them and track them, they're actually, many of them, pretty well written. Your in lieu fee ordinance it's very clear when the in lieu fees are supposed to be paid, which is prior to building permit. It's very clear that the only way that you can have any waiver or change to the requirements is to bring it actually to the city council. And yet, as just kind of as an in-house practice, there was other stuff going on. And again, I read this, as a lawyer, and the language is just so very clear, and the practice is so very inconsistent with the very clear language. So we are trying very hard to clear those up.
So
in all
what
the
you're
places we
suggesting,
find
it was a problem with implementation with the previous city staff?
Yes.
Well, I think it's how we got to this whole relational kind of problem, so.
And that's really what I wanted to bring out. Again, I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. I know it takes time, it costs money, but fixing the systems is our priority. We want to be the best run city of our size in California.
so more compatibility. Laserfish is a database we use for a lot of our data at the city. They're compatible with that. And you can have all this kind of cool mapping and actually see all of this on a map, just like that, including your app phone. And then they're also compatible with, databases and downloading information from the state. And they can do some modern looking of today's age reports. So that will give us a lot more information than we have today. Like I said, about 6 months implementation. And it's all grant paid, so we are excited to finally be at this point
This
and
is
get going
amazing.
with this.
Thank you guys.
So this is part of the
Fantastic.
$160,000 grant that.
So we applied for specific items, some of which were related to general plan update and specifically for the software. And so $57,000 of the 160 granted to the city is for the software implementation.
Awesome. And Chip, well, he's the one that brought it to their attention and got it done, so. Thank you. I had a question. Is there an online portal for, an applicant to be able to access their property file or their
Yes.
project files?
Yes, there is. So it's this public portal.
Okay. So I think that's great, because one of the number one complaints is that people turn their documents in for a permit, and then they don't hear back from anyone, and then when they follow up on it, it's all been lost, and
Right.
then they're out there back paying all their consultants to come back in, and by now you have a completely irate person in the planning department, which isn't friendly for our staff, but it's just unfortunate that that's how our system's been working.
Absolutely.
So this will help, I think, get rid of a lot of those problems.
So
Great.
what we're looking for today is for your authorization and approval to enter a contract with Dude Solutions.
I'll make a motion for
Well,
this.
hold on, we have to go to public comment first, you guys.
Thank
Our
you.
questions?
Yeah.
Did
Now, you
do-
can put a motion on the floor before you go to public comment if you wish. Are there any questions of the staff
I'll
report?
wait.
I was just wondering if there was any input from, I guess, developers or people that are using this planning software. Have we asked people that actually use the software before we enter into this contract?
We have not asked the developers
Or
on
anyone, yeah.
feedback, or what we have done is do an internal review and a review of references. So there's other cities, other jurisdictions that use the software,
Okay.
and all of that has been positive.
Mhm.
I mean, I would say that from a developer perspective, as long as, we have this friendly portal and have the capability and notifications and the self-service, everything in one place is more of what they care about as a customer versus, the backbone of the software, which is what we really kind of focused on.
Okay.
So
And
it-
it seemed to me when I was, sorry, but when I was reviewing these things, it seemed like there's like 3 main ones here in
That
the,
everyone uses it?
yeah. And I did ask around a little bit. I wouldn't say that, me asking just, whoever, that's not, but people have heard of these things, especially Bluebeam. So I don't see any issues here. I haven't any complaints.
But it's, if I could ask, for example, if a resident A who lives on, say, Friedensburg Canyon sees a backhoe in the neighbor's yard, he can actually go on this
Yes.
portal, look it up, see that the permit's been pulled, who the general contractor is, et cetera, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Or a salesman might want to do that too.
Right. So yeah, if you a salesman might do
Somebody who
too,
sells
that
lumber
is
for a
very
living, maybe.
exciting. Yeah. So actually, if you look on page 70 of your report, it shows you the top 4 that we had selected: Dude Solutions, iWork, Viewpoint Cloud, and some of them, like Tyler Solutions, was for larger jurisdictions and it was just way too cumbersome for us, and others were too simple and didn't quite capture everything that we needed, and this was really just the best fit for
Great.
our organization.
Perfect. I love it. I think it'll bring a lot more process, a lot more clarity, transparency, and this whole theme here is to get rid of this relational type politics where Bob gets whatever because, he was liked by someone and Sue doesn't get anything.
You mean
because
no
she-
more special deals?
No more
or
special
parking in lieu
deals.
of loans
Yeah.
and things like that? Gosh, the good old days. Dang.
Are there any more questions of the staff report?
No.
Perfect. Without take it to public comment, I have no speaker slips on the item. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on the item? Seeing none, I'll take it back to the council for discussion action. Karen, I believe you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I will make a motion that the city of Solvang implement this planning and development software.
I'll second.
Member Tim Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Diarnes,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Mayor Tucson.
Yes.
That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Good job, you guys.
On to item number 6, building amnesty update. Could I get a staff report?
So I'm going to kick it off and then pass it on to our building official, Steve. What this is an update and really an additional opportunity to highlight the amnesty program. Once again, we have an amnesty program for any unpermitted building projects that's been available since January 1 and will be available currently approved through June 30, 2020. Staff is available to work with anybody that wants to come to the city for both residential and commercial properties to get permitted for anything that's unpermitted without any penalties being paid. So we really encourage this, and we have a couple of additional ideas to potentially help promote this program. What we recommend, and I will let Steve speak more to it, holding a community workshop, which will give an additional opportunity for people who may have questions, wonder how exactly is this going to work, are we definitely free of penalties, be able to come in and face-to-face with city staff and be able to ask any questions that they may have. We propose that that community workshop be held on March 24th after work at 5:30 p.m. at the City Hall. And then another option to continue to promote this program would be to invest a little bit of our building staff time to actually be a little bit more proactive, not really enforcing, but just be more proactive by being out there in the city. And as they notice any kind of projects that they know may need permitting, just simply sending them a letter inviting them to be part of this program. And with that, I'll invite Steve to give us a few more words on this.
Mayor, members of the council, after you implemented the program, staff has put together, I think, an excellent brochure to hand out to individuals. You may have seen the local sticker in the local paper advertising our program. We've received a lot of phone calls in regards to the program. Unfortunately, the majority of them have been in the unincorporated county area, not within the city
I heard that.
limits. So of course, we encourage them to contact the county at that point, but who knows? Maybe the county will implement a similar program. We don't know. But we only have, at this time, 5 property owners that have partook in this opportunity, and we were working closely with those individuals. Some of them have been completed, other ones are in process. But as the city manager indicated, we'd like to be a little bit more proactive in our approach here, and one of the ideas that we developed was a community workshop. So myself, the building inspector, planning staff will be there, and if there's any questions, that we can talk to them on a more informal basis rather than them having to walk into the community development department over the counter. So that is one of our thoughts, which we'd like to try. The other one is that we be a little bit more present out in the community. If we see something that may have some concerns, that rather than turn it over to code enforcement, that we would send a generic letter to the individuals offering them to participate in the program. So we'd like to try those 2 items and see if that brings any more participants into the program.
Great.
Does the Dude solution somehow tag some of these buildings that aren't permitted properly?
When we be code enforcement action, that information, if
It would
it's
come through the
it
code
would go-
enforcement?
Yeah, but there's no tie-in with the county assessor versus the building records or anything like that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Yurnas, I would just note one of the things that I think is very important about this project is that there is an anonymity for the property owners up to the point where the city actually issues permits, so they won't essentially be put on some list for having come in and asked and then, suffer retribution later. Exactly. So I think that the city is in fact trying to be careful to be truthful in saying that you truly have both amnesty and a level of anonymity up to the point where you get your permits.
Well, I appreciate the level of protection you're trying to achieve for the homeowner or the building owner. I was just wondering if there was a way to establish that. So let's say they come in, and again, I'm not an expert in any way, but they come in and say, I think I have a problem. And then we come in and say, yeah, clearly you have an issue here, and they don't want to deal with it at that moment in time. Great, we put it on the books, but we can't go after them.
At this time, that's the policy. We're not going to actively start a code case and going on. There's only one caveat to that.
If you see sparks flying out of the garage wall.
If there's sparks flying out of the garage wall, or if we have an unvented heater or something that is an immediate hazard, then we have to act on that. Other than that.
Okay, and that's
it's-
perfectly yeah, I get it.
That's a
Yeah.
public health safety.
Well, under state statute, building department personnel would have to act on that. But that is the only exception to that.
Well, good.
But I think also to Chris's point, I think really what the reporting is key. So as you implement something like Dude Solutions, as long as we're collecting data in the right way, of course, garbage in equals garbage out, but if we're collecting data in the proper ways, then you can run some nice reports. You can find, through code enforcement, here's opportunities for people that can come into the amnesty program. We work with them to bring their buildings up to code. If it's an inquiry or any other driven type item, then reports could be run, identify those opportunities, try to work with the applicant to get them to come in.
And probably several of these, Mayor, were code enforcement actions that we actually gave them the opportunity to come into the program.
Perfect. Which I think is great, because the reason why we identified, even brought this up, is because pretty much, there's just such a high ratio of people doing work without the benefit permit because of the mistrust in our local government here. So,
well, in times past, our planning department has been widely known, or have a reputation for not being able or willing to work with people. It's been extremely time-consuming or costly. So, I think the amnesty program is doing a great job of letting people know we're here to try and help people, not make it harder for them.
And that's where we have to be very patient with doing this, because I like the idea of the workshop that you're talking about. Also, just so the council knows, Robert, Clark, and myself, we spoke to a local realtors group, and they had a lot of great questions. We've since received an email with more great questions and feedback. So we'll be getting back to that as soon as we can. But it's just so loud and clear that the mistrust in the city is what's keeping everyone even scared to even touch the amnesty program. So with that, we have to really turn the planning department around, reestablish trust in the community. Amnesty program is just one of the elements that we implement while doing that, and it's going to take time, probably a lot more than 6 months.
Oh, I
which
agree.
Is the initial opening for this item here. So
If I may, Mayor, since I've been here, and I can't speak to what happened beforehand, and I've heard stories, but one of my main focuses as one of your managers over there have really focused in on customer service and providing excellent service to the customers, and taking the time to listen to them and understanding their situation and working with them to help them get a permit or come up with a solution to their issue. And sometimes it may not be, you may be using historic building code or the existing code to help them implement that. So that is our goal. And I feel staff is 100% behind that, and we will continue that along with this program and the service that we're providing the community.
And I just want to add that we do have very dedicated, hardworking people in the planning department. This is no way an indication of anything who's currently there now.
yeah, and that touches
They're
on
doing
what
a great job.
I was about to say, which is just thanking everyone, especially you, Steve. You've been available for everything. Just so the council knows, we've been having little all-hands meetings there at with the planning department, and Steve's always there. We get code enforcement there. We have the planning staff. Everyone's been very dedicated to identifying where the breakdowns are and how we can make things better, what processes need to be identified. Zena's been there, Chip's been there, so I think it's really coming out well. It'll take time.
Thank
But
you.
Thank everyone for that.
Isn't it amazing what simple management changes can do?
So with that, are there any other questions of the staff report? Okay, we'll go to public comment. I have no speaker slips on this item. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll take this back to the council for discussion and action. My only thing here was this idea around this historic building code. Chip, could you explain some benefits of pursuing any of those ideas?
Sure. In particular, the historic building code in relation to the TRC area, many of the buildings here were built, some as long ago as 1911. And there are things about those buildings that if you tried to bring them up to your recently adopted 2020 building code, it would not be possible. The buildings would have to essentially just be torn down. We actually, interestingly, had a building owner who was processing a project through the old planning department where he was going to build a shell around the existing building and then tear the building down after building the shell to try and get through the city's former process. And working with Steve, I think we've overcome that problem and explained to him that not only was that not a great idea, not only was it really expensive, but what he was going to have to do was have significant impacts actually on the citizens of the city, because he was going to have to basically crane in pre-built pieces to accomplish that. So again, you have a history of people trying to come up with ways to get around meeting the building code, ways to get around meeting your other
How is it even
requirements.
possible for staff to be allowing?
That staff's no longer here.
Okay.
I'm shocked.
So specifically back to the historic building code, what that allows in California is that the building official has flexibility available for buildings that are either, and Steve, I believe it's 50 years old or older, or
It
in
needs to be an
particular.
identified building of significance, historical value, and that could be in a district like the downtown is.
Yeah, you can have a, I was
So-
gonna say,
so
you can
like,
have a district which
If
here
we wanted
could
to
be the TRC.
maintain the characteristic of the current TRC while allowing people to modernize a little bit easier, then we could identify the TRC as a district, for example. And is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and basically Steve becomes the decider of what flexibility can occur, knowing that they must meet health and safety requirements. You have to make sure the building's not going to burn down or fall down on people inside of it. But he's given, again, much greater flexibility to work with the property owner than just the standard application of the one-size-fits-all code.
Okay.
And again, it works for an identified district. The city happens to have an identified district called the TRC.
Perfect.
Sure. I would like to thank Steve for a very positive and forward-thinking presentation. And again, I just want to address my council members that sometimes it's very disappointing for me to hear them lambast prior employees of the city. I just don't feel that it is constructive. So thank you, Steve, for being positive and forward-thinking.
Well, I'm going to take exception to that. I'm going to address that only because I've seen emails from that particular planning director who deliberately tried to prevent things from happening, and that was not in her discretionary authority. So it had to stop.
Okay. I think the important thing is the community knows that that's not happening here anymore. With that, let's see, I think we have
Just to receive and file, Mayor.
another receive and file, so I'll move that we receive and file the building amnesty update.
I'll second that.
It's been seconded.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Diarnis.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Waite.
Yes.
Mayor Tucson.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0 again, Mayor. Thank you.
Perfect. On to item number 7, we have AB 1234 report outs, council comments and requests. We had the state of the city, so that would be part of the AB 1234, since it's an event paid for by the city. I'm not aware of any other events paid for by the city that we've been to. Okay.
I was there.
I think we had the update on the state of the city earlier, so we don't need to recover that. Let's see. Oh, I'd also like to take this time to remind all the council members that your Form 700s are due at the end of the month.
April
So
1st.
make sure you get those taken care of. And move on. Daniel or Chris or Robert, Karen?
I'll say one thing. Daryl, I really, really, really appreciate the way you keep me in the loop on forms and things and stuff I got to do. Thank you.
I'll echo that from the standpoint that I had an issue with my Form 700. When I did it, we had no guidance from our city clerk, our previous city clerk, and I thought we had to get it in by December 31st. I didn't realize we had until April 1st. So I rushed it, and I had some problems on there. And working with you and the people that you know at the FPPC, I was able to get that corrected very easily, despite the fact that there are certain newspapers who decided to make an issue of it. Shame on them. Anyway, I'd like to move on and talk about something that Zena had brought up. And I think it had to do with the branding books. Didn't Mr. Kerskov produce some branding books that he wanted to give to the council?
Yes, I have copies
There's
for
one.
council members available from Renee. City clerk will hand out, actually, I believe Robert Clark, Karen Waite, and Christy Jarnes need one.
Also, in talking with Mr. Kerskov, he was suggesting that this was really just to start a conversation with the council. And the idea being that he'd be happy to work with us to adapt it if we so choose. I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see the council, I don't know, maybe they need to form an ad hoc committee, but certainly try to figure out if this is a way to go forward, to use this as a template.
So there is a branding and design and sign ordinance item coming up on March 30th, which.
Okay.
And this can be one project for them. I think this is a great conversational starter. I think he put together a great book in a very short period of time. I think it needs more work in terms of identifying the different, branding and design elements for the city.
Right, he had volunteered to adapt that to
More
for us.
comprehensive program. But I think it's a good conversational starter and a good piece to start somewhere. But I think that we have committees that are being formed right now that would probably be a great idea to pass it through them first and let it go through a little bit of public vetting. So,
And
just
for
a thought.
those people who don't know what we're talking about, Mr. Kerskov presented this, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but he presented this at the State of the City. I encourage everybody to go back and watch it. It was a very fine hour-long presentation on what branding means for this city and how it helps us to become unique and a compelling place to visit.
Just a small comment, Councilmember Jarnes. The book that you're making reference to, that's already electronically posted online, so anyone can view that document along with all of the other presentations that were part of the State of the City and a number of other documents for people's reference at home. And
Thank you. That's perfect.
Thank you. Is there any other council comments, request?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
First, I just want to make it very clear to the public that I think Zena described in detailed explanation that the presenters, a number of the presenters at our State of the City address were not necessarily endorsed by the city. They were not paid by the city. It was their personal presentation. So I just wanted to make that very clear. But then I just had one really important thing. I know that we've been been peppered with requests for public records, a lot of them pertaining to our financial status and where we're spending money legally, legal expenses, operational expenses. And my suggestion was, and I believe I suggested it early on, maybe when I was first appointed to the council, maybe in 2017, that I thought it would be nice to, just for transparency's sake, have a listing either posted electronically in the near future or on our agenda packets of who exactly is requesting these public records, because they do take up a lot of time and staff, costs and legal costs in order to produce accurate information to the requestor. And of course, it's always in order to request public records, always in order. But I do think that the public needs to know how many that we're getting and why we're having to pay and where the money's going to produce information to the public.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to ask the city clerk to really quickly address a current implementation that's going at the city that has to deal with public records and making that all transparent.
Very good point, Karen.
thank you, Madam City Manager. With respect to public records, I'm glad the issue is being discussed tonight because before March 30th, we will be deploying another software or another platform that will allow members of the public to do exactly what Councilmember Waite requested or is making comments about. A couple of things. One is that we've already received the training and staff in all the departments have already received the training. We're on the onboarding portion of deploying the application. We anticipate doing so before March 30th, and I will have, with the city manager's permission, on the agenda of March 30th, I will have a brief 5-minute presentation so that folks at home and in the audience can really understand what the technology will do, because it will do a number of things. One, it will allow folks to submit public records requests online. And furthermore, it will allow us to build a library of records, meaning that every public records request that gets submitted and completed becomes part of that virtual library for anyone to access. So, for example, if anyone seeks the Form 700 for any member of the council, that record, once completed, and it's uploaded and it remains in the repository of records. So the next person comes along, just do a quick search. They don't even have to submit another public records request for that item, because it's already part of the archival repository of records. So it will save time, number one, with respect to complying, and number two, will allow us to more fully keep track of all the records requests and offer a greater level of transparency to members of the community and to the city council. I will be happy to provide additional information, but I think a 5-minute presentation will be in order at the March 30th under presentations. Thank you.
What and what program is that provides?
This is called Next Request, Mayor.
All right.
It's fully functional. It allows for time savings. We can actually even track down the amount of time that staff uses in terms of complying with this request. If I were to spend an hour of my time, I can certainly click a button, say I spend an hour working on request number 20-01, and everyone within the workflow will be able to do the same, meaning that we can actually tangibly quantify how much it will cost us to comply with just any public records request. So,
Cool.
Yeah, and I want to make a distinction between the people who are asking for real reasons. I mean, I don't want to stop anybody or prevent anybody from asking questions, but at the same time, we've seen a small group of old guard come before us and try to weaponize the system and bog down the system, costing the city tens of thousands of dollars over a course of a year. That is just not acceptable. So hopefully this will allow people to see who's doing what and why. Can we expand this also to the planning department? I know that at one point all of the complaints were anonymous.
Well,
So that's actually part of your permitting software.
yeah, that's
will
the
also
permitting
be
software,
improved.
and the city no longer takes the anonymous complaint issue anymore because of the problems we were having through that. The only other thing that I wanted to add on was when I spent some time at the city of West Hollywood, they had a program, I think it was called OpenGov or Transparent Gov. And what was kind of cool is that I guess it integrated in with their financials and it made it all available online. So any member of the public could search through and that might be another cool little tool that we can add
OpenGov
on.
is one of the more popular ones that makes all the financials very transparent. It's
Okay.
about $10,000 a year cost, so it's something to look into.
Something to consider at some point.
Yeah, but all the warrants and all the
It'd be
expenditures
kind of
would
cool
be
for
right
people
there.
to go do all that and not have to even,
Right.
And what about hyperlinks? So, for example, when you go to the city's online videos, I know that maybe you can speak to this, Gerald, because I think you know about this.
correct. Another thing that we will build into the infrastructure of the application, next request, so we need to get used to the term next request for public records, is that we will take, and this will take a little bit of time to build that infrastructure. We will take every document that's currently posted online, meaning TOT information, financials, budgets, all of these records, and we will simply build the library and build agenda or budget, and just really link that to what's already online. So when people come to the next request application or platform, they can simply view those documents without even having to submit a public records request for it. So that
So they're all
addresses the
like
issue
a
of your
hashtag-
linking.
They're all linked through a hashtag type of system.
Yes.
I guess what I was getting at is I know that the San Luis Obispo County has hyperlinks in their video somehow to their agenda, so that all of the, for example, let's say it's just marijuana. We want to see all the discussions that were had by the council over a course of a year, and you can easily bring that up.
We will be able to do that as well. Just create a link with cannabis applications and extract all the links for that sort of search keyword, and then do the linking. Naturally, will take a little bit of time
So all the
before we build
agendas.
the,
And this is
the
all part of
virtual
that-
library.
This is all part of that new software that's going to replace our current
Correct.
videoing stuff that's falling apart.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So and then my last item was we touched a little bit on historic building code earlier. Is there any sense in having a mild staff report and determine if there is a desire to do something like that in the TRC?
Well, the code that you adopted included the California Historic Building Code, and the provisions are already there. So we're enforcing them today. So if you're wanting to get some clarification on what that code looks like and how the building official can implement stuff, we can probably put together a staff report for you on that.
So that would become part of the city policy?
It already is.
It essentially is. It's because this state code gives the building official authority to implement that.
Do we have a list of historic buildings that we assume to be historic?
So again, the way that it is implemented, you can have identified districts, and Steve, at
Buildings
least
over, yeah.
as I understood, buildings over 50 years, and then we
That
identify
are
the
on
TRC.
some kind of a potential list. Just can't be a building that's 50 years old that has no significance. But if it's
Right.
determined to be significant, over 50 years old, or in a historic district, even though it's not 50 years old, it's incorporated in there.
And Steve, if I could clarify, my understanding from the conversation we had is that you would be treating the TRC as such an historic district.
Absolutely.
And so
The entire
you've already
TRC?
taken, you've already taken the action so that if it's in the TRC, Steve can treat it as something within a historic district and apply the historic building code.
Okay. I think a little update on that would be informal to
We can work on
the
something
public,
for you on
and
that.
it's just part of the ongoing, how do we best work with people and encourage people to, modernize and get things done and permit
I don't
things.
know how much the previous building official utilized that, but I'm very used to utilizing that in the communities I've worked in, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.